Hello everybody and welcome back to our Fast Fact series. I'm Ted, your host, and for this Fast Fact we're going to look at Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor in particular. The attack itself occurred on Sunday, the 7th of December. On Sunday, the 7th of December, 1941. And it was, the attack was designed to knock the United States out of competition in the Pacific. For years now, the Japanese Empire and the burgeoning American trade and the informal empire, have been competing for resources, materials, and of course access to China. The Japanese had they had a great weakness, but they also had a great strength. They were closest to China. They were in the region. They had industrialized greatly, and the former colonial powers, mainly the Dutch in what we now consider Indonesia, which was back then the Dutch East Indies, the British colonial interest and imperial interest, which stretched from Australia to the British Raj, what is now India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all the way into Hong Kong, and other islands, Papua New Guinea, and so forth. And of course the French in the Indochine, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. All of these were looked at as prime targets for the Japanese to expand their colonial resources. But the Japanese had a great weakness as well. They do not have large oil deposits, and they do not have very large iron deposits. They were very much they very much depended upon American steel and oil for their industrial capacity, for their militarization. And the United States was very, very far away. The closest American possession, the closest state would have been California. Now, the United States held on to Hawaii, which at this time was just a territorial possession, and the United States held on to the Philippines, although the Philippines was, the Filipinos themselves were enmeshed in a war of liberation, trying to push the United States out of their country. They had been doing so since the late 1890s, ever since the American invasion during the Spanish-American War. They had been trying to shake off colonialism. They were fighting there, and then there were other select islands in the Pacific that the United States had used as coaling stations, and these are things that we discussed in a previous fast fact and also in previous lectures. But the two forces generally came to the idea that a war was coming, a war was brewing, and the United States decided to sort of cut the legs off of the Japanese, so to speak, by restricting, by placing trade embargo, by not sending them anything that could be used for war or to further their industrial capacity, to sort of humble them and to sort of get them to play second fiddle to the United States in the Pacific. The Japanese quickly came to the idea that if they could launch a very devastating, quick, sudden knockout punch to the United States in Pearl Harbor, then they would be forced to retreat, and the Japanese would be able to take possession of the Pacific and to simply rule. The United States would simply not want to fight the Japanese because of that very sudden, very powerful, very hard thrust. And Pearl Harbor was the target. Now, the United States knew this attack was coming, and the United States had actually, Franklin Roosevelt had actually sent reinforcements. He had sent ships, submarines, men, sailors, and of course aircraft carriers, along with the naval aviators of the day. He had sent them to Pearl Harbor to sort of act as the reinforcement, the quick guard reinforcement, while also reinforcing the Philippines. The Americans thought that the Philippines were going to be the target. The Philippines are closer to the Japanese. General Douglas MacArthur was stationed there, along with a large fighting force. And it was thought that MacArthur would be hit first. He would be able to hold them off, while reinforcements came from Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, while definitely a shock and a morale dampener, was not as complete as later propaganda would say. The day that lived in infamy saw just about 18 battleships sunk. There was, of course, devastation and loss of life. 1,000 men died in the sinking of one ship alone. When the USS Arizona sank, it literally entombed those 1,000 soldiers. But the attack was not as devastating as it could have been. For example, the fleet that was sent to Pearl Harbor was broken up. The submarines were not injured, but were not damaged in any way because the submarines were not at Pearl Harbor. The aircraft carriers were not damaged in any way because the aircraft carriers were not at Pearl Harbor. There was only battleships. It was an audacious move for the Japanese to make, and in the wake of the attack, there was a great outpouring, great showing of heroism. Dory Miller, for example. Dory Miller was an African-American messman, a sailor. And during this time, there were great restrictions on the combat roles of African-Americans. Dory Miller, he was allowed to join the Navy, but he was supposed to serve the Navy in a service capacity. As a messman, as a steward, and so forth. He was not expected to at any point. He was not expected at any point to take on a combat role or to receive any sort of decorations for his service. Miller would eventually be awarded the Navy Cross, but after intense lobbying and over a year after the events. Most of his contemporaries who fought well during the attack, they were recognized and awarded immediately. That's our quick fast fact on it. And of course, there's more that can be said about the attack of Pearl Harbor and African American treatment in the military during World War II. But we cover those in a main lecture. The fast facts are designed to be very quick videos. As always, hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about it. And I am Ted. And I'll see you guys next time for another fast fact.